It is 12 o'clock, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Tammy. I've been with Advantix for 6 years now. And the goal of, first of all, let me make sure, Lou, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes, I can.
O- Okay, perfect, perfect. So the goal of today is really to talk a lot about what is a wireline audit and what it does, specifically around the urgency of POTS lines. We're seeing a lot in the market, and it's very important for you to be aware of what's out there and what is coming to see what you're at risk for, as well as take a deep dive look into one of our case studies showing how we saved a hospital system millions. And then we're going to go through, if you move forward with an audit, what the deliverable you get as an audit client, what the value add really is. So on with me, I have Lou with Advantix as well. Again, apologies. He does not have his video on because it's not allowing him to connect, but we're going to press forward anyways. We do have an opportunity for you to be registered if you're still with us at the end for to choose one of these following prizes. So make sure you stay at the end. We're going to go ahead and jot down your name, and then we'll be doing a prize giveaway that we'll follow up with you on. So again, I'm Tammy with Advantix. We were founded back in 2021. We initially started as a traditional TEM company, wireline and wireless. We also added in 2018 our connectivity multi-carrier SIM, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we are a managed connectivity experience provider headquartered out of Greenville. And really what that means is it's all connections, whether it's wireline, wireless, failover, all connections is what we're here to assist with. And with that, we do have 5 main core services. We have our multi-carrier smart SIM, which I talked about. We do have wireline and wireless expense management, as well as mobility optimization audits as well. I would say that today we are here to focus on wireline telecom audits. And as I go through, please feel free to put comments in the chat or questions as you have them. Love to get some questions and some feedback, and we'll go ahead and go through and answer those. So when we're talking about a wireline telecom audit, what are we talking about? We are talking about internet, data, phones, right? But we're specifically, you can see here, we have POTS lines highlighted in yellow because we do want to talk a lot about that today and where there could be risk at for you. So with that being said, I'm going to flip over to the next slide, which we're going to talk about how an audit is done and what the benefit to you in that audit is. So clearly, an audit is what it does is providing spending, right? Providing spending for you to be able to identify, or sorry, rather us identify where the excess of spending is, the billing errors, and really kind of cut down on cost reduction to put money back in your budget, in your department's budget, in your company's budget for other initiatives, right? We do that a couple different ways. We're building a comprehensive inventory. We're identifying unused and duplicate services. For example, we did have a client that was had a location that was torn down, literally turned into rubble and rebuilt as a parking garage. Yet 5 years later, they're still paying for that unused service. So that's something that we would identify and would go after the carrier for credits where we can. In addition, we're looking at benchmarking pricing and negotiating on your behalf. We're also looking at contract compliance, pulling together contract data, and looking at billing errors. So saving money is critically important. But what is urgent is going to be when we're talking about POTS lines and the code yellow within healthcare that can be affected because of some of the changes. And we're going to take a look at that here in a moment. As we go through, though, what really is the benefit of doing an audit, whether it's for POTS lines specifically or whether it's for all of the services, right? We're looking at a shared savings model. What that means is we have true skin in the game. We do not bill you until that savings is validated, right? And then truly, we become an extension of your team. I've never talked to a company that says, oh, yeah, we have our IT team has all the time in the world. We can go ahead and we can knock this project out. That's not generally the case. So we truly become an extension of your team to do all of the legwork on it, and it becomes very minimal to you and your team from an effort standpoint. All right, fantastic. We're going to go through, we're going to talk about what the urgency around POTS is. Now, back in 2019, that seems so long ago, yet not very long at the same time. Um, FCC said, you know what? We're going to phase out all copper lines. Carriers are no longer allowed to or required to maintain them, work on them, and what happened was you saw very slow. Some people jumped on that bandwagon and removed their POTS lines. Other companies did not because there was not any sense of urgency around that. The carriers, although it was ruled they could go ahead and get rid of them, it wasn't a push. They were not ready. And what we're seeing in the market now is they are ready. And how we're seeing that is throughout the transition of all of the changes within the regulations of late in, I think it was summer, sometime in June, July, the FCC said, you know what, we can now cancel, or the carrier can cancel your service with as little as 90-day notice from 120 days. Now you say that's great, that's important. Why is it important? Well, there's a couple things. The sense of urgency I was talking about, one with AT&T, they've already said in August, they said across 20 states, we're no longer going to offer these services going forward. So you either do something about it or we're not changing it, right? We're not going to do anything within the states. We continue to see that sense of urgency. I'm going to share with you something very specific in relation to a notice that we got from a client. This client, if you can see this here, this was dated 10/10. On this, the second highlighted section shows that effective on or after November 1st, which we're already on the 13th of this month, services will be discontinued or withdrawn. So what this is saying, and they remember they're required to give 90-day notice, what they're saying is on or after this date, we're not going to help you anymore, right? We could discontinue at any given time. Well, that's not really a notice. So when this went out, the first notice, guarantee you, went to the invoice. Who gets the invoice in your organization? Guessing it's not the IT people. My guess is it's finance. So I ask, are you at risk? Have you been notified? And are you sure you've not been notified already? I'd love some comments if anyone has, if they've seen any of these notices as of yet. That would be fantastic. And I do have a question. Sure, POTS lines, absolutely. Plain old telephone lines. They're the legacy copper lines. And we're going to take a look at a picture of that next. So this is actually a very clean picture of all the wires that run through. They're the copper lines that run from one connection to another. So that old telephone, I'm old school, I didn't do this. If the old telephone line that you pick up and you're answering, the one you had to walk across the house and every year the cord got longer and longer, that is a plain old telephone line. Businesses today, there's thousands and thousands of lines still active today. And although this box is a very clean picture of what they actually look like, right? This really, really emphasizes the importance of making sure and the operational risk of doing nothing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that for a moment in relation to a client that we have that is a state entity. One of their lines for one of their um, levels of within the state was it just stopped working, and they needed a repair on it. It took 3 months to get that line repaired. And the reason is because this is outdated technology. It's not only outdated, but the people who used to work on this technology has since retired or no longer working on it. And that industry knowledge is not being transferred down. So it takes a long time to get it up and running and operational if they will do it at all. And so it's critically important that you know how many, if you have pot lines in your ecosystem today, right? And what your risk is. This is not going to continue on years and years down the line. We've seen that increased jeopardy, and it's time to do something about it. Because yes, it's important to save money. And yes, if you have 1,000 lines and you only need 500, we're going to help you find a replacement for those 500 lines and save you and disconnect those 500 lines you do not need, right? That's part of what our audit team does. Remember, we're removing services that are not utilized. However, if you do nothing and these lines go away, which they will, can your organization survive? Can the healthcare industry survive without POTS lines? And do you know where your POTS lines are today?
And Tammy, hey guys, this is Lou. If I could just interrupt. Back to that question,
Absolutely.
to the question we were asked, you can see in the very first note, critical systems at risk. We're seeing these POTS lines, these legacy copper lines, they're still in use. They're still in use a lot. As I said, for fire and alarm lines, we see that in many facilities, particularly in healthcare, because we have many, in healthcare organizations, you have many facilities that are decades old, 40, 50,
Hmm.
60, 70 years old. And while there may be alarm systems that are more updated with 4G technology and wireless, we still have many systems where they're the plain old copper lines that are powering those.
Hmm.
The other is elevator phones in
Hmm.
hotels as well as many buildings, including many in healthcare. There's still the
Hmm.
copper lines that are powering those because they're not required for power from the building, but they're still there. And again, in a healthcare environment, if you had a patient or if you had, God forbid, you had someone going into surgery being rolled in and stuck in the elevator, that's not a good thing. Obviously, you don't want to be, too alarmist, but the point is no one would want to get stuck in the elevator and not or find that it not works. There's still, believe it or not, there's still a ton of fax machines that are in use,
Hmm.
and point of sale as well in some locations where they don't have the access, they don't have the updated equipment or what have you. So the point is there's still millions, tens of millions of lines throughout the United States that are in operation today that whether people are aware or not, will this time next year, if we look at AT&T and Verizon's stated records, 80 to 90% will be shut off by this
Hmm.
time next year. So
Yep. Yep.
so I just want to point that out.
Yep. There used to be old equipment too, right? That you would plug into that to a landline unit as well. I'm hoping that nobody still uses that equipment, but that could that could be affected as well. So, Gina, yes, you had asked a question. Uh, POTS line, is that what we consider landlines? Yes, that would be accurate. All right, perfect. With that, Lou, I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to you to take the next few slides.
Sure, sure. No, no, thanks. And again, apologies not being on video, guys. I don't know why it doesn't give me the ability. But if we just dive in a little bit into the weeds, Tammy had made a point earlier. We minimize the amount of work for our clients, but believe me, it's an awful lot of work. There's a tremendous amount of work that's being done, a lot of heavy lifting. And the very first part of it is we're looking at right here. When we do an audit, we're creating an inventory. You'll see a sample of what I'm talking about here in a moment. But basically, we're creating an inventory of every every penny that you're being charged by the AT&Ts, Verizon, Frontier, Lumen, you name the telecom wireline carrier, we're making that inventory and we're doing a deep dive analysis to identify what is active versus inactive. Now, you're getting billed for it. So in all probability, it's a billable line. It should be, there should be dial tone. It should be active. But what we mean is, are you using it? And, again, there has been a move away from a lot of these landline services for years, but at the end of the day, a lot of times they're never shut off. So that is a huge component of cost savings that we find. It's a 100% reduction. Obviously, eliminate what you don't need, that's 100% savings. Um, Compliance risks. Now, just on another note that Tammy just made, the reason that some people have not replaced these landlines is that the equipment they're using is not, they can't upgrade it. They would have to make a capital expenditure to actually upgrade the equipment. And since there was no sense of urgency, there was no requirement, they just let it lie. But the point is, there's a lot of healthcare regulations, fire codes that mandate these connectivities. So what's going to happen, we already know, and we've already seen this. We've been seeing this. This has been going on for the past several months. The past 2 years is when we first started seeing lines getting shut off in some areas of the country. Um, is that, what you don't want to happen is all of a sudden their facilities are getting alarms saying, hey, the fire alarm panel is beeping. Well, it's beeping because the line went dead and there's no quick fix.
Yeah.
So that's just similarly all the different things that we're looking at, and ultimately we'll be uncovering cost savings as a result. But this is, as we dive into the actual audit itself, that's what we do. So the next slide is going to show you, particularly what I was just talking about, active versus inactive lines. So again, this has been a large focus for us with many organizations. So one of the things that we'll do is once we identify, in this example you're looking at right now, there was 601 telephone lines. This client was actually a regional, Midwestern regional banking system. I think they had 160, 70 locations. I can't really remember at this point, but there were 601 lines we're looking at. So once we identify all the lines, we physically know what they are, we call them. We do test calls. And we'll do test calls multiple times in the evenings or after hours when no one's supposed to be there. And then also during the day, we'll cross-reference with the client what these lines, what do you know what your fax lines are? Do you know what your alarm or elevator? Most of the time people have no idea. Or they may have a record somewhere, but it's not readily available to everyone. But simply what you can see here, when we did the test calls, you guys are probably, many people probably remember, if you dial a line and you get the call that the number you've dialed has been disconnected. Please check the number and dial again. That's what we'll call an out of service condition. Other times you'll call a number and it's just a fast busy, not a busy tone, but a fast busy. That's in many cases an indication that the line is, if not out of service, there's an error on the line. Dead air usually means there's an error on the line. And usually when we make these test calls, in most cases, it's not like it just went out of service last week or last month. Chances are many of these services have been out for months, if not years, and no one knew. So in this, as we look right here, out of this 41,000 in monthly spend for these telephone lines, almost $4,500, $4,600, we can say unequivocally, that's why they're in red. Chances are you can eliminate that tomorrow. That's $52,000 in annual spend that goes right back to our client's budget. What's in yellow, busy signals, recorded voice announcements, and ring no answer. All of these are yellow because chances are many of them don't need to be in use. They're suspect, particularly the busy. If it says busy, well, remember, we called that location at 1 o'clock in the morning. If there's no one, now in the healthcare, it's possible that someone could be on the phone, but in many cases, why are these numbers all busy at midnight, at 1 o'clock when all the offices are closed? So they're suspect is what I'm saying here. And then in green is where either the number, we actually got a live person, it matches a fax number that they had, we know what it is. So again, this is a lot of work, this is a lot of labor, but it gives the intel for our clients that they can make an informed decision to either eliminate or to research further. So just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to identifying these pots, savings, and opportunity for reduction. So the basically, as we're saying here, with this audit, obviously, if you don't do an audit, you're at risk. We talked earlier. I'm not going to go into these again. But there's regulatory risks. There's they become emergency situations. If your fire alarms are not working, if the elevator's not working, that's a problem. And then we would like to think that okay, there are solutions out there, but there's a lot of incompatibilities that you may or may not be aware of. And finally, what we're telling people as well is that when it hits the fan, if you're in a geographic area that all of the POTS lines get shut off, the vendors who are available to make solutions and to remediate this, they're going to be swamped. Get in line.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not like you're going to be able to fix it because the options, there's going to be a backlog now, all of a sudden, people scrambling for the exits in a crowded theater. So
Yeah.
with the audit, when we do an audit proactively, we get a clear inventory of what you have today. You have ability to also look at how that might affect your budget, what recommendations might be there for savings. But most importantly now, as we start talking about the operational perspective, you can ensure the continuity of those services, and you have the time to do it.
Mhm. Yep, absolutely. And I will add to that, Lou. I mean, the goal, right, is for us really to focus on POTS lines because it's such a sense of urgency right now. We can, however, look at all of your inventory as well. And when we're talking about what you get out of an audit, right, you're going to get, and I'm going to show you some examples. We are going to focus on one specific slide and a few, but building that inventory gives you that full glass pane visibility of all of your spend. Some companies don't even have that today. They don't know what they're spending. They don't know what the bills are, how much they actually is part of budget. So we're building that inventory for you. We're building it and we're showing you in this deliverable the spend by location, the breakdown by location, by carrier, right? We're giving you the contract data so you know when contracts are expiring. If they're not up for renewal now, maybe it's 2 years from now, but we're providing you that data. We went through that POTS test call summary that Lou talked about, and that's just kind of the overview of it. There's an entire detail slide as well that go into all the notes from every test call that they make. And minimum of two, but there's a lot of times they're making multiple calls to validate and revalidate, right? And then we also have an entire savings and recommendation slide that we track. Because if you remember, I said we do not bill until that savings is validated, means we do not bill you on net 30 until we've fully validated on that bill that you would now save those funds. So a couple of these I'm just going to go through quickly. All of you will get a copy of this at the end to look at, but this is the spend inventory by product. You have spend by location here. And this I'm going to stop on for just a minute, and Lou's going to take a couple minutes just to deep dive into some of the areas that we have highlighted.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks, Tammy. Tammy, if you could, for just one moment, just jump back to the spend by okay,
Location, sure.
no, I'm sorry, the very first one,
Oh,
the inventory spend by product type.
yeah.
So Tammy made a comment, and I would go further because we've done over the last 10 years. What we find is that again, this is the example I gave you. This is a Midwest regional bank. The data has been scrubbed for CP&I purposes, but what happens many times is that if we're speaking with IT or speaking to different departments, they kind of know like what they're spending on internet and maybe on their data network, but
Hmm.
holistically they don't have a big picture. And
Hmm.
at different levels of financial management and IT management, there is no kind of single pane of glass. So what you're seeing right here is that this client's spending $446,000 a month, and there's the breakdown of the different product categories. Um, and you can just slide it down again, Tammy. You already touched on this. We break it down
Yep.
now, where you're spending it, who you're spending it with,
Hmm.
et cetera. Now, if we look at this right here, this is an example. So this is taking from the macro. We just looked at the big picture. Well, now let's get down to the micro. So this is 601 Union in Cleveland, Ohio. What's going on at that location? Well, you can see they have TV service. They're a bank, so they have TV services. I believe in this case they don't have that much. The bill was aggregated to this was several sites with that account. But you'll see they also have Frontier for their POTS lines, their landlines. But what's interesting in yellow to the right, notice that these are all the same copper lines, and yet we're seeing different price points. They're coming out of different COs. You can see there's no regulations anymore. There is no requirements. There's no publicly regulated utilities here. So you'll see differences in cost. Um, I highlighted here the late fees because routinely, I mean, in this instance right here, this customer is spending over $3,000 a month in late fees over all of their services. In fact, one of the products that Tammy had touched on previously with Advantix is that we do expense management. This customer ended up becoming a customer of ours for expense management because,
Mhm.
interestingly enough, what they were paying in their monthly late fees more than covered our charge to do the whole expense management. But we're looking
Mhm.
at all the details. The other part right here, you can see they had a data network with their MPLS. They had internet services, but also notice they had DSL. Who's got DSL anymore? I mean, how much how much is, 50 kilobits down, 20 up going to do anymore? The point is that DSL is no longer in use. That's $102 a month. That's $1,200 a year. I'm sure they probably haven't used it the last 10 years. That's $12,000 in spend that just went down the drain over time.
Mhm.
Music, yeah, their phone system has that. They didn't need that music. Again, that is something that was phased out 10, 12 years ago. It was just sitting. Of course, they would have eliminated it had they recognized and known it was there. The
Mhm.
audit
Yep.
can bring that specificity and detail, of which now the customer can make an easy decision, which is in most cases, yeah, get rid of that. We don't need it.
Yeah, yeah. And Lou, weren't you telling me the other day? I mean, we've seen POTS lines continuously go up and up and up. The charge just, there's no regulation anymore, right? So it keeps going up and up and up. And some of these fees are actually relatively low in comparison to what many people are paying for POTS today. But didn't you tell me you saw one around $2,000 a month for a POTS line
Yeah, no,
recently?
good point. This project, the data here in this project is a 4-year-old project. Yes. Hate, hate to say it, but it's kind of a running competition or a running, it's really not a joke. We're looking to see what's the high water mark that we have seen for a copper landline. Now, remember, a copper landline, that's two pieces of copper wire twisted together. We have now seen the high water mark 2 months ago, $2,617 for two pieces of copper twisted together. It was actually a Marriott hotel in San Francisco, and they had
Mhm.
two lines. They were spending yeah $5,200. It was insane.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yes, and again, well, it's once again if you don't look at the micro, like in this client right here, they're spending $446,000 a month. If a
Hmm.
bill went up by $1,000 or $2,000, they're not seeing it.
Yeah.
So that's how these charges have continued to eke up, and people are not recognizing it. And over time,
Hmm.
it's a creep. So that's really what's been happening. People are shocked when we actually show them how much they're spending. So it's really extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. And Lou, you've talked about a couple of different industries that we've done audit for today. I mean, this is geared really towards healthcare and that code yellow that we keep talking about, hence the yellow coloring
Mhm.
throughout. Um, but really our process is truly driven towards, it's not driven towards any specific industry. We are concerned about the healthcare and we are concerned about lines going down, and that definitely is our focus. But our process and our methodology is proven regardless of the industry. It continues to the work that we do and the product that we put out, the differentiators really is the visibility that we give to you, the work that is done, and the fact that we don't bill until those savings are validated.
Yep. No, 100%.
All right, so again, just going through quickly, just to give you an idea, this is spend by carrier. Of course, you can break down each individual one as well, but this kind of gives you that visibility from the highest provider or carrier down to the lowest. And then this is just an example of the contract. Again, this data has been redacted for quite some time, but you can see contract that the process is still the same, the contract start date, end date, knowing what you have and when it's coming for expiration. Is it going into a tariff or can they change the rates on you? And to be mindful and aware for that visibility. And then the last is just the savings recommendations, right? We're going to truly track it line by line for you.
Yeah, and if you
Oh,
look at that for a moment, thanks, Tammy.
oh, I'll go back. Yep.
So our process, again, our role is to create the inventory, get the approval for, like review what we found, get the approval or denial, or in many cases they might have to check with other departments, but ultimately we'll get a decision. And in this case, as you can see right here, whether the very first one, whether it was a dispute on a contract, whether we
Mhm.
renegotiated with the incumbent, or frankly, in many cases, disconnected what was no longer needed. You can see in the third line there, they were spending $2,500 a month.
Mhm.
It was a closed site. They had services at a site that was no longer theirs. So that was a
Mhm.
100% reduction. So and then of course the last two lines represent where we found there were contract errors. We clawed back credits they were due because of overpay. So
Mhm.
for this client, you can see here the annualized savings, 28,000 a month. They're on an annual savings of 661,000. They'll save that in the next 12 months, the next 12 months after that, the next 12 months after that. In year one, you add on all the one times that we were to claw back for them. It was 689,000. It was a successful project. But again, as Tammy said, not only we do not invoice until, so for example, if you looked at the $489 that was a one-time credit,
Mhm.
a little bit to the right, we only when we saw that $489 show up as a credit on the invoice, then it is validated. Only when the $2,500 and nine, only when we see on an invoice that it goes to zero, now it is validated.
Mhm.
So the savings are being accrued by our clients before we ever invoice any of our fees.
Mhm. Nicely said. Absolutely.
We focused on healthcare again because what we recognize with healthcare, the real question for a lot of our clients, when we speak to clients, are like, man, this kind of seems like a no-brainer. If you wave the magic wand, we would love for this to take place. The reality is, and particularly in healthcare, what we've noticed is that resources are so strapped.
Mhm.
While this is an important project, it's not urgent. In many cases, this is something maybe 15 rows down on the priority scale. And we understand that. That's why I said earlier, our goal is to minimize the involvement by our client, but there is an awful lot of work. Well, what we really want to do is we want to do the heavy lifting. And what we want our clients to do is when we bring the data to them, we want to deliver it in such a way that they can make an informed decision rapidly
Mhm.
or with checking a few other departments. Here's a deep dive study that we did with this was again, another Midwest university healthcare system. You can see 16 hospitals, many employees. They had done an audit 12 years ago. They were experiencing increasing costs, but the reality was no one really owned it in totality. So the solution in building that comprehensive inventory allowed them to see what they currently had, what they no longer needed. The results, I believe, speak for themselves. I mean, we reduced their annual spend by 5.2 million. Now this is a client that was spending 14 million annually. We reduced it by 5.2. It was a very successful project, and it was a little over $250,000 in credits that we did get back for our customer. Um, so they were very, very appreciative. And I will tell you that 47% of those savings that we found were services or locations that were closed, no longer in use, or services that weren't being used. They were being used. In fact, they had a lot of circuits. For those you might remember, the BRI lines. They were being used for diagnostic equipment that had been removed from the hospital. I think it was 11 years before.
Wow.
But
Mhm.
yeah, that was a good win. But that's indicative of what we can. But going back to again, why we targeted healthcare on this is that again, when we think about Stephen Covey's quadrants, there's things that are important, not urgent, not important, not urgent, urgent, not important. Because of what's happening in pod signs right now, we recognize that this is now important, but it is becoming urgent. It'll become urgent when, just like a code yellow, if a code yellow hits, all hands on deck. You have to address it. These lines go
Mhm.
out. Facilities and others are going to have to address what are we going to do about the fire alarms, elevators, et cetera. So that's what we're seeing right now, and why we're sharing with you that we have a proven process and track record for decades now in doing this.
Mhm. Absolutely. I mean, it truly is real world impact. You saw the example. We redacted some data, not to share, but you saw that Verizon example. And we are the ones that found that, not the client. So the question is again, are you at risk? Do you know for sure if you're at risk? How many lines do you have? Have you already been notified? Right? Let us jump on this for you and let us get that visibility for you to see what's next and where we go from here. Because it truly is an operational imperative. It truly is important for you to act now versus wait. Now, of course, yeah, you can do it yourself. But I go back to what I said earlier. I've never joined a call with an IT VP director and them say, yep, we have IT people just standing in the waiting, ready to work on another project. Y'all are swamped. They are swamped. They don't have the time to do it. This is a shared savings model. And again, we don't bill until the savings are achieved or validated. And so it's allow us to help you through this. We have the industry knowledge. We'll provide you that blueprint so you have what you need going forward. Now, as far as how to get started, right? I'll be sending over this presentation for all of you to go back and look at and have visibility into after this call. I'm also going to reach out to see if we can schedule a call with some additional key stakeholders to find out. Maybe it's just sharing information, maybe it's finding out how we can assist you. But we are here truly to help you. And as far as the time investment is very minimal. And I have my contact information on here as well. So as I said, that I have somebody joining on my team that's collecting the names of the people that are still here, and I'll be reaching out shortly. And one of you will be giving a chance to select one of these prizes. So before we wrap up, and the intent was to wrap up a few minutes early, I want to make sure. Let's see, I do have a question in here. How long does the audit and your remedies take to execute? Great question. This is a fantastic question, actually. So, generally the contract we have kind of in scope for a year. It all depends. It depends on mostly carriers because if we have to get a credit back from a carrier, sometimes that can take months. And remember, we're not going to bill until it's validated. So I think the longest one, Lou, was it about 8 months that you had it took truly to get the credit back from the carrier?
Um, no, I mean, we waited 14, 15,
Oh
16 months in
gosh,
some instances, but the
that's a
um
lot.
but the real question is, as you said, how long did it take? Now we're focusing today on the POTS lines.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if we were doing an audit where we're looking at all the internet lines, all of the voice lines, all of the data network lines, it really all depends on the scope. And the most important aspect is how quickly can we get the data? Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is a challenge for many organizations. They don't have, unless they already have a telecom expense management company in place or a third party who's managing all of their invoices. That is really where the challenge is in getting the details. Now, we are very proactive working with the providers to pull that information ourselves. Our customer usually we work with their AP folks to understand what their accounts are, and then we'll go grab that data. That's the biggest component. So once we have access to the data, in a perfect world, we have created the inventory, made our recommendations, customer makes decisions, we implement. All of that is a 6 to 7 month period
Mm-hmm.
where we're complete, and now we're just waiting for all of the invoices to reflect the changes. The reality is, though, as I said, as Tammy was alluding to earlier, we've literally requested accounts and services to be shut off, and 13 months later, they finally get shut off. Now we got to go back and say, okay, thank you for finally stopping the bill, but you were supposed to stop it 12 months ago. Now we have to go
Mm-hmm.
back and get a credit of 12 months for our client. And that may take another 4 or 5 months. So the reality is, I mean, this can be a long engagement, not that our customers are involved all the time, but for the finality of the project itself, it can take a long time. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a lot of customers and a lot of companies when they're doing they most almost every client we ever talked to, they know exactly what we're talking about. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
we requested a shut off, took them 3 months to do it.
Mm-hmm.
They've already spent that much time to shut it off. Thank you, it's done. Hey boss, that's no longer billing. We're done. they're not saying, "Oh, let me go open up another ticket and go spend several more months tracking this down again." We know
Hmm.
that, and the clients
Yeah.
know that too. So that's really why. But to that same question, we have had clients. We've another large retailer. They have over 2,300 retail locations. We engaged with them 5 years ago to do an initial audit of some of their services. We are now on the fourth or fifth schedule 5 years later because they kept saying, "Well, can you look at this? Can you look at this? Can you look at this?" over time.
Hmm.
So, and believe us, we we embrace that. We certainly look forward to it. But the clients
Well,
basically say they obviously they like the work that we did. That continue to give us other avenues to approach. So,
mhm. I will say, Lou, that your team for sure is a bulldog with these carriers, constantly following up with them. And that takes a lot of time and that takes a lot of effort, but it it, it doesn't go without the reward of actually getting the billing to stop. So, um,
we got skin in the game, right? We don't get paid
yes,
until it gets done. So our interests are aligned with our clients, and I think that's what most of the executives, when we finally get to speak to, that's their takeaway. It's like, hey, you're in this with us. So
yep, yep, absolutely. We do have another question. How can you benefit from can you benefit from an audit without having to change a bunch of providers? Absolutely. We renegotiate contracts. We look at the contract expiration. We can renegotiate contracts and or replace where we see, where we see benefit. And at the end of the day, you get to make the recommendation, approving the recommendation or not. But we certainly are here to drive the process with you and not go outside what your plans or what doesn't make sense for you.
well, Tammy, specifically to that question, uh, we several months ago we reviewed the last 78 projects that we
Yeah.
did. 19% of the savings that we achieved over those 79, 78, 79 projects, 19% involved a change of provider.
Hmm.
What we're always doing is when we benchmark the rates of what they're paying today, let's say they're spending, uh, $1,500 for a 100 meg internet circuit. The benchmark rate today might be 8 or 900. In many cases, the incumbent might reduce their price to say 1,100 or 1,000, and a competitor might be sitting there at 800. Client might
Hmm.
say, "That's not enough savings. I'll stay. I'll take the savings with the incumbent." But in some
Hmm.
cases, they do say, "Now, you know what? It does make sense to change it." It's completely our customer's discretion.
Hmm.
But that is really what we're seeing. Um, and in the example we showed you today, um, I think it was like 92% was there was only 8% change in provider. So
Hmm.
the reality is it's minimal. It's surprising to me when we actually did the research.
Hmm. Great questions. Any other questions, last minute questions anybody wants to type in before we wrap? Well, this has been fantastic for sure. We certainly appreciate your time. We want to make sure that we end. We have 2 minutes left. So, we have the names here. You're welcome to drop if you don't have any other questions. And I will be circling back with the winner as well as the rest of you just to make sure, we can't answer any additional follow-up questions. But thank you so much for joining. Again, appreciate your time. Thank you, Lou.
Yep. Thanks all. Take care, guys.
All right. Thank you.